Hello, welcome pen friends. Welcome to another singles ink profile. I happened across this one while I was doing my sorting and it just jumped right out at me and I thought, why not? We haven't done a pink in a long time. And this is an unusual kind of pink. It's Robert Oster Cherry Blossom. So it's kind of a dusty pink, but at times I look at it and I say, pink, is that pink? And it looks quite a bit darker on the swatches than it does in writing. So let's just dive right in. There's quite a bit to look at here. Let's get it in the water test first of all. I think I know how it's going to come out. I would predict that it would disappear, but you know, I've been surprised before. So let's just find out. There it goes. Okay, so now I forgot to label this one, but this is Waterman Tender Purple. This was the results of it. And it was very, very typical fountain pen ink. It washed away and it was perfectly easy. It got an A on the clean out scale. You would expect that, and so did I, and it was wonderful. So very well behaved. You would not want to trust it on an envelope. And if you were taking important notes, you might want to think about it too. But it's a great, I like the ink very, very much. So let's start in with this Robert Oster Cherry Blossom. Let's get into the Rhodia Gold book and take a look here, see what I found out. Okay, first of all, it really impresses me on Tomoe River paper. It does this thing where it it just really shows off a really pretty color when you're painting it. It needs quite a bit of ink in order to do that though. And then in the broad nib, I was still okay with it. You know, I thought, well, it's light, it's very subtle, and you guys that know me, you know that I like a really kind of a saturated ink and brighter, but still it's okay in the broad nib for me. And then when we get into the fine nib, well, it's better on this paper than some of the others, but I didn't really like it so much. Okay, then here is the chromatography. It was very, very subtle. It just kind of lifted up, and then you could see some little blue tint, but not very much. So that's all it did on the chromatography. And a big thank you to Pen Friend K.S. for the sample. It's a lovely ink, and I like it for artwork. And I also like it in a broad nib. Plus, I was thinking, I've seen so many of my friends' nibs that are like flexible or they're vintage, and I think that maybe, you know, it would look better in something like that. But let's go into the notebooks anyway and see. This is the little Maruman spiral notebook from days ago. And again, you get quite a bit of interest, quite a bit of color variation when you're painting on this paper. And you get some very subtle shading with your broad nib, with this broad nib anyway. It's a standard steel Yowo nib. And I liked how it looked. It's still, that's about the edge of how light I can tolerate ink though. When it dropped down into the fine nib, I just was like not horrified, but almost. So, and I wrote very weak. Yeah, this is oh boy, it almost went in the bath. Very smooth, good paper, you know, but I just didn't quite get along with it in a fine nib. Probably that's the saturation. Okay, so recently I had someone, and I can't remember which pen friend it was, ask me, well, how do you handle it when you don't like an ink but you're going to profile it? Well, it's funny because I can always find something I like about an ink, but it's true, like with this one, I got right down through with the broad nib in my very first trial with it. And then as soon as I put in the fine nib, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to pick something different. But then I thought of that person and I thought, well, here's the answer. You know, it's a very standard thing that I do. I put the inks through the exact same thing. No reason why I can't do it, even if I'm not going to buy a bottle of it. So here it is on the Leuchtuurm 1917 dot grid paper. And I know that I would be okay with it in the broad nib on my bullet journal because it did real good. It bled through just a little because of painting it on so strong there. And then, no, I was very unhappy with it in the fine nib. So, but there's a lot of other nibs you may have out there that would do this ink justice. So don't, you know, we can't judge it just by this, but this tells me what I need to know. Okay, and then here we are in the CVS Caliber 4x6 notebook. Gorgeous shading and color. I mean, just look at that. You would think it would be darker in the nib, and so it did fool me a little, but that's okay. It still held up even on this cheap paper in the broad nib, and then no way Jose on the fine nib. It was very light and weak, for me anyway. So there we go. And it didn't do too much show through, just it tried to bleed through on the heavily painted part. Okay, now let's hop on, and we're going right to the Tomoe River paper. Oh my, I've really abused this lately. By Pen Gallery. This is the 68 GSM Tomoe River paper. Okay, and then I did think that it kind of looked just a little faded out on that, and we're okay. When I hold it like that toward the natural light, you're getting a, when I hold it up, it darkens, but when I do that, you kind of get a little bit better of an idea. So there it is in the broad nib and the fine nib. And let's go back and see how it did. So just a tiny bit of bleed through where it's painted on. So let's keep it available because we're going straight on to 52 GSM Tomoe River paper. And there it is. It shows quite a bit of shading and edging there when you paint it on. It puts quite a display. And then there it is in the broad nib and the fine nib. Now, I like it better on Tomoe River paper than I did, say, on the CVS Caliber paper, for sure. It did bleed through when you paint it on like that. That was quite a bit of ink to glob on there. And the Waterman Tender Purple did, too, so that just shows you that's pretty typical. Okay, let's see how they look kind of together, even though... Okay, so it does look, you know, it appears darker on the 52 weight, the lighter weight paper. It appears just a little bit darker, and that's white paper, so that we have that advantage, plus just the idea that it just seems to do that. It seems to leave us more detailing and darkness on that, but there you have it. Okay, now next sample is Clairefontaine 90 gram French ruled paper, and it appeared nice. It actually, it's so interesting because across the board, when you painted with it, or when I painted with it, I liked it. And then I also got along with it on this with the broad nib. I saw quite a bit of shading here. And then the fine nib, I said a little weak. So I wasn't like, you know, too down on it with the fine nib on the Clairefontaine. Let's see, let's turn that over. Nothing went through at all, and that doesn't surprise me. This is wicked good paper. Okay, let's go on to Rhodia. This is Rhodia 80 gram, the dot pad, the larger dot pad. And again, it does an impressive display when you paint it. And then you get shading and in the broad nib, but very subtle because it's a very subtle ink. It's not that saturated. Okay, and then here it is in the fine nib. I didn't make any snide remarks or anything in the corners, so you know, Clairefontaine and Rhodia, that's pretty good paper. No need to worry, I guess, on that. Okay, so on the cheaper paper, the Georgia Pacific 20-pound copy paper, probably not as much feathering as other of these inks has done, but if you hold it close enough, you could still see there is a little feathering. And then it was okay with the fine nib. So this thirsty paper sort of handled it okay. I don't know. It bled through quite a bit, though, here and there, in the broad and the fine. You can see even in the little boxes around the fine nib and down here. So it did bleed through quite a bit. But that's really cheap paper, and that's just for your reference. Okay, so now it's time to look at the panel, but let's just peek in. Okay, so a genius that I am, yeah, it's very typical, and it's lightly saturated, and it's gone, so that's very typical. So now we know, and let's just get the panel ready here. Now this was a little challenging. I don't have tons of inks that come close to this, but I have a couple. So I managed to put together a panel, although it gets a little bit interesting. So, okay, so right in the middle is our ink of the day, Robert Oster Cherry Blossom. And I knew that it reminded me of something that I had already profiled, and pretty soon it was clear to me that it was this one. It was Robert Oster Dusty Pink that most reminded me. In fact, I think I tagged that. Let me see. Yeah, I tagged that in this other journal, I think. I think I did. Yeah, here's Robert Oster Dusty Pink. It was done, let's see, it was in the October 2018 ink flight. I wasn't using a fine nib back then. That was something that a viewer suggested, and it's been a very good idea to try it in both. But so it was only in the broad nib, and I see that there was a lot of shading, and I just feel that it was a little bit darker. I'll let you look at that, and then we'll flip forward to today's. The differences are subtle, though, really, but this seems lighter to me. So there you have it. It reminded me of that one, and it also reminded me of Diatramenous Apple Blossom, but not quite. So there we have it. And then Vintage Schaefer Script Persian Rose. Now that's interesting. It's not exactly the same, of course, and there's a lot going on there with that ink. I'd have to see it in a nib. So it's funny. This one up here on the right, the Robert Oster Lipstick Red, I actually gave away the bottle, the rest of the bottle. That was another one where I had seen it on Instagram in someone's beautiful artwork, but really I'm doing mostly writing with my inks, and so that one I just didn't get along with, and that's quite a bit darker than Cherry Blossom. So not a really big surprise that it wouldn't be like at the top of my list. Okay, now some of these I have them on here just for comparison, like Lamy Vibrant Pink. It came closer to Cherry Blossom, of course, than something like Diamine Hope Pink did. And then I've got a couple on this side that are really not pinks. They don't seem, well, they just don't seem to be pink. This Blackstone Barrister Violet is kind of a lavender. But it did kind of make me think of it, but I know that this comes across a lot darker and more saturated in a nib. It's not pink, it's lavender, so that's not really fair. And same thing with up here on the right, Monteverde Rose Noir. But if you're looking for something that is like way more saturated and is more purpley, I guess I'm grasping at straws, but I really like the Monteverde Rose Noir. It's quite a bit darker, and but it's out of range, really. I'm not really sure what would be just a few dialed up, just a few notches from Cherry Blossom, but whatever it would be, I probably would really like it. It wouldn't take too much more before I'd be okay with it, with that kind of shade in a fine nib, but it would take more. And then Colorverse Lights on Series. Now that's an interesting ink. It's pinky and it's darker, and I do remember I did work with that one quite a bit, and I know it showed up better in the nibs. So hopefully this just sort of helps you place the ink. It's kind of hard because it's a little bit unique. It's not what I'd say is traditional pink. It's a very dusty color, which I know there's people out there that just really like those colors, and I like it for artwork, which means that the sample will go a long way, because that's what that's the right amount, you know. Our remaining sample is the right amount for artwork. It would last me a long, long time. Okay, this time I'm not going to forget to show you the visual journal, so let me get that out. And I'll need to flip back after we finish to the other one because I forgot last time. Okay, this was interesting. It behaved pretty well. It gave me plenty of time to put some details in, but they didn't really stay, and that doesn't surprise me now that we know how the water test went, and the chromatography too. But it's, you know, it's kind of a disappearing act, and yet it was really pretty as it was forming, because it did some little pink highlights, and then it did some darker, so not quite maroon highlights. And I just took a paintbrush and flat out did a swatch because I thought, where are we? You know, how much of this is just disappearing? So that's just full strength right off the paintbrush, not diluted. And then down here I put down water and then drops, or not drops. I'd use the paintbrush on it just to see. So it's not spectacular, but there it is. Now let me turn back to the one before, because I felt really bad about that. I forgot to show you Waterman Tender Purple, and that actually had a little bit of complexity. That was the profile before this one, and it went from purple to pink, so it was giving us mostly just two colors, but it did give some darker highlights too, and that was really fun. So I mean, that really did a lot of outlining, and from dark to regular purple to pink, and I thought that was neat. So there we have it. So I guess this one just jumped right out at me as I was going through red and pink, I think. And right now I'm working with purple and blue, which is going to take quite a while. So I'm not sure exactly what's next up for ink, but enjoying, just sort of grabbing some for now. As soon as the whole project is organized enough, we'll have a nice vote and get a viewer's choice series going. But the next thing to look forward to is the Sunday Fun series. That's already scheduled for you for Sunday morning, which will be June 30th, 2019. So hope you enjoyed this, and let me know what you think. Hopefully I wasn't too down on the ink. It's beautiful. It's just that it needs to be in a really broad or wet nib that'll really lay down the ink good, and it's kind of identified for me the need to have maybe to get into something a little more flexible, a nib that would really put down the ink. Now I have a Noodler's Ahab that I love, but I've been running exclusively a really dark ink through that, which is the Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses, and that's a bear to clean out. So I clean it out, I do, but I don't want to put a lighter one like this. I don't think I'd be able to. I'm just not quite there with that. So let me know what you think of Robert Oster Cherry Blossom, and have a great rest of your day whenever you're watching. Bye for now.